Hey everybody, Don here again, and welcome back to Ragged Edge Lure Works. Well, today I want to talk about airbrushes and cleaning airbrushes. Now, when I got started in using an airbrush to paint lures a little less than a year ago, this is the airbrush I got with the kit that I bought, and that kit included the compressor and some paints and this airbrush, and this is a super cheap. This is a master. It's the G22, and I used this thing for about 2 or 3 months, and it served me okay, but I just started having more and more issues with splatter and with clogging and all that stuff. And I had lures I had to get painted, and I was having too much trouble with this. So I went down to Hobby Lobby and I bought this. And this is the Iwata Neo. And this was, I think it was 69 bucks. If you were to buy this on Amazon, I think you can get it for $24 or something like that. And it's a fine airbrush to start with. So I bought the Iwata Neo. Now this isn't actually made by Iwata, it's actually the Neo for Iwata, but they're selling it under the Iwata name. And it's a pretty good airbrush for the money, 69 bucks. It's got a 0.035 millimeter nozzle and pin, and it served me pretty well. But then I wanted to get something with a little bigger nozzle. I wanted to go to 0.05, or is it 0.5, 0.05? I don't know, whatever. And so I went back onto Amazon and I bought this thing. And this is also a master, and this is the G33. And 39 bucks on Amazon. I have Amazon Prime, so I get free shipping, so a good price. And I really use this a lot. But primarily I like that 0.5 needle for priming baits, and when you want to lay down a lot of paint. But I think I've told you guys I have clogging issues and all kinds of stuff. Now I'm learning as I go. I've had a lot of great tips and info from subscribers and other friends of mine who are lure painters. And so now I'm reducing my paints all the time. I started adding 40-30 balancing clear to my paints, because that helps with flow and paint adhesion to the lures. But I still run into issues now and then. Now, every time I change colors, I run right over there was a sink. My shop is in the utility room down in the basement, and there's a bathroom down here, and there's a sink. So every time I'm changing paint colors, I'll go over and I'll run hot water through this, and I'll just keep opening up the needle until it's running clear. Then I come back over here and I'll run just a little bit of water through this thing, and I'll back purge it, which means you block this end and pull the trigger back, and it all bubbles up and it pulls that paint out of the needle area. And then when I'm done with that, I'll take just a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. This is 91%. I'll put a little bit of that in the cup, and then I'll just run it through until it runs out. I'll run a little bit more water through it to clean out the alcohol, wipe it out, add my next color. And I've been doing pretty good, but after every paint session, I clean my airbrush. And let me show you how I'm doing that. Okay, so this here is my cleaning container. So what I have here is I have some tweezers. I have my nozzle wrench. Come on, get a hold of it. My little nozzle tip wrench, and then I have some brushes. And so disassembling these things is pretty easy, and I'm going to start with the master. First thing I'll do is I'll pull the back part of this off. This rarely needs to be cleaned, so I'll set that aside. Then I'll pull out the needle. This is the needle chuck screw, and then I'll pull out the needle. I'll stick this in a solution. This solution is 1/3 ammonia-free window cleaner, 1/3 alcohol, and 1/3 water. I don't necessarily use distilled water. And then about 10 drops of glycerin. So once I've got the needle out, then I'll pull the carrier out. Excuse me, there we go. My hands were a little slippery. You unscrew this. And pull that out. I'll drop that in. Also the spring, that goes in there. This trigger mechanism goes in there. The trigger itself goes in there. The part that goes to my air supply, I do not put in the cleaner because I've started to get a little stickiness, and I don't know if it's the trigger itself or this, so I don't put that in the water. Whoa! Yeah. But before I drop it in the water, you want to take off the tip protector. So that's your needle protector, that's your nozzle guard, I guess. And then I'll take this little wrench and I'll unscrew the nozzle itself. This is the tiny part that you don't want to drop on the ground because they're hard to find. See that? Drop that in there, drop that in there, and then I let that soak for an hour, 2 hours, sometimes overnight, and let that soak, and then we'll clean it out. Okay, so once this has soaked for a good amount of time, I'll come back in with my tweezers and I'll start pulling out the parts and drying them off. So the first thing that I pulled out is the trigger. And on these master airbrushes, I'm not thrilled with the way they're made. You see this trigger has this little brass pin, and I don't know if that is what's causing my sticking or not, but that's a part that I'm not overly thrilled about, the design of these master airbrushes. Next thing I'll do is I'll pull out this part right here, pull out the spring, pull out the nozzle cover, I guess that's what it is. You want to make sure that it's cleaned out so you can see through that. The needle guard that goes on the very end, usually I'll take this part and I'll swab it with a Q-tip. This one doesn't have any paint residue on it, so that's good. The part that holds the needle in and goes up against the trigger, I don't know what all these parts are called. I probably should have taken a schematic out. This is the needle chuck. I do know that name. I'll pull out the needle. Just make sure there's no paint residue on that. You can see I got just a little bit of residue from the last time I used it. And then we'll go ahead and we'll pull out the body of the airbrush. And I'll let water cleaner flow through that a few times. And then I have this set of brushes. And I'll just run that brush up into there. Make sure that there's no dried paint residue. I'll do that a couple times. Then I'll wipe that off as well, and I'll try to get everything off of there. Get it good and clean. Then I'll try to blow through here to get all the fluid out of there. Sometimes I'll just whip it like that to get the fluid, any residue fluid. Alright, so that's that. And last but not least, the most important part of this whole thing is this tiny little nozzle right here. You can see this thing is kind of tricky to get a hold of, and you don't want to drop it. What I'll do then is I'll take my needle and I'll push it in here through that and just kind of rub it through there. I bought a set of reamers, nozzle reamers, but there's not a single one of them in this group here that is as small as that needle. So I basically use the needle itself as a reamer to try to get any paint out of the inside of the nozzle. So I'll do that several times. If I drop it, I'll go back in for it. Until there's no paint showing up on this paper towel. Then I'll blow and I'll blow through it and just make sure that I can see the light through that, so we're good for that. Now for the reassembly. Like I said, be really careful with this, because if you drop it, it's hard to find. And I'll get it started, and then you just tighten it up with this little wrench. Okay, so that's step number one. Now the second thing I'll do is I'll put the trigger in, and you can see through there, you can see the hole, and this is where your air source plugs in. So I want to make sure that there's no fluid in that hole down in the bottom. I hope you can see that. So just blow through there a few times. Then the tricky part with this is to line this up, because the hole, you know, with this trigger being on a pivot, it can move, but you want to make sure that that's in like that. Then you take the needle carrier, I guess, and you run that in here. See, this narrow part goes up, and you run that in there until it touches the trigger shaft. Put your spring on, and then this whole thing screws in right to that gap. There you go. Now you can put your needle in there, being careful not to bend the tip. And you see how that sticks out the end. I like to back it off and then put this on so you're not risking bending that. So that's the nozzle cover, I guess. And then I'll put the pin protector, guard, I guess they call that, on the end. Then I'll push this in all the way. I like to back it off just a fraction. And then you'll add the chuck, and that tightens the needle down. And now you can see when you're delivering air, let me put this on because this is what your hose hooks into. I have a quick disconnect on mine. And you see this pumps in and out, but it doesn't pop all the way out. And I think that may be because the brass pin is slightly corroded, or the air valve in here is sticking somehow. So sometimes that doesn't want to pop all the way out. And even after I've stopped delivering paint, I'll still get some air through there. Pulling it back is what feeds your air. You pull back and it opens the needle and it delivers the paint. The pushing down on it is where you get your air. So down provides air, pulling it back provides paint, and that atomizes and comes out the end. Then last but not least is this guard. Now on this master, one of the things I like about this master, because I'm not great at trigger control yet, is it has this thing on the end that, if you see that, limits the travel of the pin. So if you just want to supply a little bit of paint, you screw this in and you can only pull it back so far. You can back this all the way off and you can see how much the pin travels after that. So that's the disassembly and the reassembly, the cleaning of the airbrush. Now most airbrushes are the same. One of the things I want to show you about the Neo that I like better than the Master is the trigger itself. So let's back all this off. I'm going to dump this all in the cleaner. I'm going to rotate that. So I'm taking out the needle carrier. The pin, you can just see the trigger just fell out, and everything else goes in the cleaner. Same thing. I'm going to take this off because I don't want to get this wet. And then the nozzle itself. Loosen that up. Drop that in there, drop that in there. Now let me pull out this trigger. If you recall, on the Master, the trigger was really two pieces, and it pivoted right here, where the Iwata, it's all one piece. And so putting this in, reassembling this is much easier. Now, it's not that hard to do the to do the Master, but it's it can be a little bit of a pain in the butt when you first get started. I hope that was helpful. Painting with an airbrush has been a blast for me, but it can be very frustrating, especially keeping your airbrushes clean, and that is critical. So hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Peace.